whatever we're saying now is on, and it is 2 p.m. Eastern time. Welcome everybody to the Culture Talk. That's what I decided to call this. And it is because this gentleman, Mr. Headbloom in beautiful Michigan, and I will let him show you the mitten thing and tell you where on the mitten he lives. He said, hey, do you have like a rubric for this? Do you have a title for this? And I'm like, dang it, I should have that, right? So I decided in correspondence with all the other branding you see here in the background, everything, every product, service, type of interaction that I offer starts with the culture, something, something. So let's call this, and henceforth, this will be the Culture Talk. And welcome to the Culture Talk. Ellen Headbloom where in Michigan are you?
Just outside Grand Rapids in Western Michigan.
So if I
So
hold up that Michigander
so if
hipster
you meet
mitten,
Michiganders, they will either hold up the palm of their right hand or the back of their left hand, because it's basically in the shape of a mitten with the thumb part in the eastern side. But I don't know how that works with mirror images and internet cameras. But so Detroit is here, Grand Rapids is here.
Okay, and you somehow with that, I've always wondered how this works, because it totally ignores that there is an Upper Peninsula. So this whole thing,
you can do sort of this. It's not proportional because our hands are usually, and the Upper Peninsula is much smaller, but you can. But I've actually done a blog about how Michigan is wonderfully bipeninsular and one of only 3 states in the U.S. that can be seen from space. So, but I can give you more nerdy Michiganisms there.
All right, nerdy Michiganisms, I love it. All right, we are here for the Culture Talk, and today's Culture Talk is about belonging in a time of, well, self-imposed / artificial / forced separation, because we live in strange times where we are, I don't want to resort to aggressive war language, but we are fighting, we're battling an invisible enemy of sorts, and it is putting us home. It is putting us into our home offices, and it is pulling us away from each other, at least physically. And my mantra for the past 2 weeks has been, no, there is no social distancing. We are still being social with each other. This is what's happening right here. We might be spatially challenged and separated, but heck no, I will not succumb to social separation. I will be social, and I hope you will be too. And thanks for joining me for this, Alan.
You bet. And I think it was one of our intercultural friends who observed this a couple of weeks ago. It's physical distancing, but not social. We've got social media. We've got wonderful technology that we're employing, and allows us to reach in far and wide into people's homes and bunkers, and the conversation continues.
Right. So, Alan, I could introduce you, but we got plenty of time, so you can do it yourself. But the only thing that I'll throw out there to the people watching online, I've known Alan for, I want to say, years, and it all started, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, I think we had the beginning of our social interaction on a social media tool called Twitter, and I found Alan as somebody who is like-minded and who shares stuff that I'm interested in, and he found some of the stuff that I share interesting, and from that we developed a virtual relationship, and then a couple of years ago we finally met in person. I will not forget this. It was a bloody cold day in the Grand Rapids area near the college where you work and live. And Alan is doing a marvelous job in introducing his clients, which could technically also be my clients. However, there's only a minimal overlap to the English language and to the, well, sometimes the tripwires and traps of the English language. And he's doing that with the eye of an interculturalist. So while I'm not a language trainer by no means, and people have asked me to teach them German, which I probably will never do because I suck at teaching languages. Um, I have a strong admiration for the work that you do, Alan, because English can be a tricky friend, and you make that friend a little bit more approachable. But that's the way I view your work. Why don't you tell our audience what it is you do?
Sure. And you should also mention for our viewers today that you and I both share languages, either English or German as a first or second language. So
That is true, yes.
we have this
Should we
commonality.
continue this in German then? No, 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 not
Könnten wir,
today.
aber wollen wir nicht. Yeah. Um, so I guess I credit my grandfather, who was an immigrant, with my beginning on this journey, because I grew up, in a very sheltered monolingual community in East Michigan at the time, in the northern Detroit suburbs. We spoke English, English, English. We behaved North American all the time. But my grandfather always spoke with this charming, to his final days, with this charming Scandinavian accent. And when I was 12 and my younger sister was 11, he took us back to the old country, to Sweden for the summer. And I had a chance to spend this impressionable summer of mine at a young age, watch people interacting in something that wasn't English, behaving in ways that weren't North American, and leading fully rich, productive, interesting, fun lives. And I came back home from that summer thinking, I got to get me some more of this. Of course, the only place you can probably study Swedish as a second language is maybe Minnesota, which you know something about, Christian. But so I started taking German in middle school, added and continued in high school and college, added Spanish in high school, added French in college, and then along the way started studying applied linguistics, added lots of smatterings of other languages, studying either because of travel or interest, and then moved to lots of different places over my lifetime. So that's all tied into having a degree in English as a second language gives you that connection to people not from here. But then on the flip side, recognizing that, oh, this place is not like home. And if you've felt the pain, if you've been that fish out of water,
Yep.
then you can really identify with folks who then land in your native backyard, and how can you make their transition more comfortable? How can you show them some of the tricks, show them the ropes in idiomatic language, and guide them both linguistically and culturally. This is how Americans work and think and act, and these are the expressions that they use. And you may be using certain language that's very formal because you learned it in a textbook, and your high school English teacher back in Brazil or China was not a native speaker, and so they just were rigidly glued to their textbook when they're trying to teach English. But you've got to get native if you're going to go someplace else. And so my job is helping people fit in this new surrounding and helping them feel like they belong.
And feel like you belong. That's exactly what I want this conversation to focus in more, right? This is what we set it up to be, because that is not only what you help people to accomplish a feeling of belonging. This is also the title of a television program that you have been producing for years now, Feel Like You Belong. If you're not familiar with this, folks, check it out online. I think it's feellikeyouBelong.com, right? That's
Right.
the quickest way to find it. It lives on YouTube. It lives all over the interwebs. And I want to credit you, really, Alan, for helping me overcome some of my apprehensiveness around being on camera and having these conversations in public. I never had any issues having these conversations in the privacy of a room, whether it be a private room or a corporate room. However, being recorded, being on camera, and doing this publicly was in the beginning a bit difficult for me. I really had to stretch my comfort zone, or as Andy Molinsky would describe it, my zone of appropriateness quite a bit. So kudos to you for role modeling this and showing that we all have a voice and we should have a voice, especially the practitioners in the field who are doing work that may not always be seen by everybody in the general public as really bottom line relevant and relevant for specifically for increasingly diverse societies, and the US, I guess, is the poster child for that, or has been a poster child for that for generations. So yes, thanks, Alan, for spearheading this initiative. Feel Like You Belong is the title of the program. I do really want you to check this out, and we will post this, and I will post this later on as my fingers can do what I do without doing stuff on camera. I'll post this in the comment section. Um, so what do you do with Feel Like You Belong? What is your
Well,
mission?
let me
What's the
just go back
purpose
to
of this program?
origins, and I really appreciate your
Yeah.
comment about that, because truly being on camera is not a natural human activity. Or even for that matter, standing up in front of a large group. They say that the two things that humans fear most are death and public speaking, and not in that order. So,
Yes.
have being the focus of attention. Yes, for some people who are, flaming extroverts, that might be okay. But for, the majority of folks, and just, and intensifying that with the pressure of, being in a studio, lights are on you and the cameras are on you and the crew and everything is focused on you, is it can be daunting. And I've been crossing cultures my whole life. I've been putting funny sounds in my mouth my whole life. But I have to give a shout out to my wife and best friend, Kim Roberts, who is a professor of film and video at Grand Valley State University, who, after we got married, said, "Honey, you're doing this marvelous work, but it's one-on-one, it's in small groups and seminars. How can we tell the world about this? Let's make a TV show." So I'm not a very bright man, but I'm bright enough to listen to a wise woman who has big ideas. And so, okay, gulp, swallow your nerves, and admittedly, the first episodes were not glowing, but you get a rhythm, you get a pattern, you get some momentum, and people guide you along the way. And also, you become glued to other talk shows. And how do other people handle, conversations, and what techniques do you see and do you like? And part of it's just you have to be yourself, but the comfort is not natural, but it grows over time. So, and
Yeah.
you're doing lovely work with both with your podcast and now with these culture talks. So, many of us can do it.
I think it's a matter of practice, right? As is, and this is what I teach in our classes with our students. And when I say students, it's more like clients. They don't see themselves as students. People who cross cultures, either for private or personal or professional reasons, they get to practice new behaviors. They get to practice experiencing living in an environment where behaviors are different from the societal norm, quote unquote norm, that they're familiar with, and extending their comfort zones, their known zones, or as I said earlier, their zones of appropriateness. If you don't know what this refers to, I've talked about this multiple times. Get the book Global Dexterity by Andy Molinsky, where he describes this concept in more detail. The zone of behavioral bandwidth that is appropriate to you as an individual. And that zone can be stretched. It is not set for life. So you can actually practice it like a muscle, like you're flexing your muscles, you're going to the gym, you're building perseverance, you're building endurance, you're building more flexibility, more dexterity in your behaviors. And just like I was teaching my clients to do this in new cultures, I taught myself, or I continue to teach this myself and remind myself that, sure, this might be unfamiliar and uncomfortable at first and unknown to me at first. The more I do it, though, the more it becomes second nature. And many of you might be familiar with the 4 stages of learning. At first, you're unconsciously incompetent. You don't know that you don't know how to do this yet. Then somebody introduces it to you and you start doing it. And so you become consciously incompetent, and it's super awkward. That's where most people stop doing it, because it's so not them. It's not in their zone of appropriateness. And as you continue practicing, you become consciously competent and you recognize, hey, I'm doing this. I'm riding the bike. The training wheels are off. Oh, awesome. And at some point you become or subconsciously, unconsciously competent. You don't even think about it anymore. You are doing it on autopilot. And that applies to any type of learning that we as humans do, whether it be trying to stretch our own behavioral zones into being illuminated with artificial lights you can't see. Well, I'll turn this. This is one of the lighting elements I'm using. So, hey, behind the scenes look, right? And being on mic and on camera. And so this is something that I'm learning, right? And the more I practice it, the more it becomes second nature. And Alan, on your show, I can tell you've been doing it long enough. So it has become second nature for you.
Absolutely. We started 7.5 years ago. We've interviewed over 175 immigrants, refugees, expatriates to the United States, people trying to put strange words in their mouth, trying to put strange behaviors into their repertoire and just make themselves fit in, because certainly for some people, for expats, you're on a 3 to 5 year assignment. You probably at the end of that, you get sent back to the main office in your home country in Sao Paulo or Berlin or wherever. But in the case of immigrants, they've made a choice. Okay, we're going to stay here. We're going to put our roots down here. Our kids going to grow up here. And then for refugees, there is no plan B. You have to succeed.
Yeah.
And so for all of those folks, how can you fit in? And so I've really come to this profound understanding. It's a really simple word, but belonging is deeply emotional, and it's what says, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can be here. And I figured this out a while ago. I was an old fan of the American sitcom Cheers, and they had a theme song, and it's where everyone knows your name, where they're always glad you came. You want to be where everyone knows your name. And I think about the cast of characters, these just misfit people who come by this tavern in Boston called Cheers, and the big schlub of a guy, Norm. I think he's an accountant, right? And by many standards, a kind of a lovable loser. But whatever kind of horrible day he's had, he opens the door, walks in, and everyone turns around from the bar, says, "Norm." And then, okay, come on, pull up a seat. We'll get you a beer and you can unwind. We know your name. You belong here. And just that, feeling like people know your name, people recognize your face. Say, yeah, come on, sit down. That's not a simple thing. I find that really, really profound.
And thank you for bringing up Cheers as a North American model to model belonging. And we talked about this before we decided to do this here today. Alan and I had a conversation around the word belonging. I think there is a much repeated, often subconsciously or inadvertently repeated misconception about integrating those who are different. The diversity and inclusion field, the D&I people who are watching this or who might join this later, they know intimately what I'm talking about. There is a feeling of being, or there's the activity of welcoming somebody who is joining the group from outside, who is new to a group. So that's an activity that I can extend to the newcomer. I can do what's within my means and what's within my control to welcome others into the group. However, the feeling of belonging to that group, I cannot extend. That is something that has to develop inside that person that is joining that group. So these are two different activities. So yes, we as a society, whether we're doing it now virtually or in hopefully soon again out in the real world, we can do what's within our power, within our zone of appropriateness to make people welcome. It's hard for us to instill the feeling of belonging. The belonging need, that's an intrinsic thing that has to come up within somebody. But it is the group's behavior that can eventually lead to a sense of belonging, like Norm on the show Cheers, right? And Verna Myers, some of you may be familiar with that name. Verna with a, I don't know what that's called. There's a horizontal line over the A of her first name, Verna. Verna Myers is one of the quote unquote gurus in the diversity and inclusion field. She now works for Netflix in the human resources department. She used to have her own practice. I think that's still ongoing, and she's just not doing it herself anymore. And Verna Myers is often quoted with a phrase that says, "Diversity is being invited." Or is being asked to come to the dance. And diversity means I'm inviting people to the ball. Inclusion means you're asking the people to dance. So it's one thing to have them join under one roof or within one group, but actually including them in the activity that makes the group is the inclusion step. And how do we create that sense of belonging, Ellen? How do we do this in these times of artificial separation? Well, what's your
Sure.
take on this?
Well, actually, while you were talking on that theme, I've seen this woman's name before, and I was quick Googling it. I think it's Vernay.
Vernay.
I think so. An American pseudo linguistics, it's a long A, but I'll
See,
check that later.
I learned something. Thank you.
Well, and we had, and if I could actually, that's an unintended tangent, but for me, we've done videos on this on Feel Like You Belong, about the importance of getting names right.
Yes.
Because there's nothing that communicates acceptance more than, okay, yeah, you have a name that's not, Bob or Mary or whatever, but you're bringing who you are to my city, my community. Let me extend that sense of belonging, not just more than welcome, by saying, okay, here's your name. How do you say it? Not all of us have great linguistic ears. And so you may need to ask 2 times, 3 times, but as you mentioned before, anything comes with practice. And so if you take the time to learn somebody's name, that is very meaningful to that individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than, that's too hard. Can I just call you Bud? No, that's no.
Please
Don't do that. It's you're showing your own ethnocentrism and unwillingness to reach out and embrace. And all of us have to do some of this. Granted, people who move here are going to have to learn the tricks of operating here, right? And so,
right.
If you're going to go into business meetings and it's, well, not in times of Corona, but otherwise, normally, it's a handshake and there's a certain protocol for handshakes. It's, reach out. It's like medium firm, sort of web to web, 2 or 3 pumps and then let go. And, there are other versions of handshakes, which I had to learn awkwardly when I was living and teaching in Nigeria. Well, actually, no, there was, the handshake is looser, but you actually hold it for like a minute or 2 while you're just doing the ritual greetings, like how are things in the village? And North Americans are going, okay, that's enough touching, like let
yes.
go. But other people are, have the namaste, have the bowing, people from the Mediterranean world, from Latin America, there's this kiss, and how many cheeks do you kiss back and forth? So if you move someplace else, you have to learn some of those operating rules. Otherwise, you're just going to find yourself left out all the time. And that's a potential decision, but that also creates your own limitations or glass ceilings for moving up in that culture. But going back to my original tangent, names are profoundly important.
Well, I can sing a song around that. My name in the English language is not easy to pronounce for those who don't speak German, and I've heard many variants of my last name, and it in the beginning it sometimes felt like a slap in the face if people got my name wrong. It's like, this is part of who I am. This is part of my identity. And every time you don't even make an effort to pronounce it the way it is pronounced, it means that you don't care about me. That's the underlying emotion that can be created by that. Now, I mean, I've lived in the United States for overall in my life, probably for more than 17 years, and I've come to accept that my name just doesn't roll easily off the tongue of English speakers. I don't take it personal anymore. A long time ago, I guess.
But for the few people who say, no, can you say that again? I want to get it right. That's an extra degree of respect that
Exactly.
you really appreciate.
Yes, and if people try to get it right, if they make a conscious effort, and then still don't get it right, then it's perfectly okay. Then they've shown, hey, I'm trying. At least I'm trying and doing the best that I can. And you, those of you who have heard me talk before, you probably remember, and I do this excessively. There's a book by a gentleman who's left us. His physical being left us. Don Miguel Ruiz wrote a book called The Four Agreements, and one of them is do not take anything personal. So no, I don't take it personal anymore if people don't know how to pronounce my name or if they behave in a way that's not okay for me, because taking something personal makes it implies that whatever people do is because of me. Nothing that people do is because of me. It is, everything has to do with them. So I don't take anything personal. The second agreement is always do your best. So if somebody is trying to do their best in pronouncing a name, then it's their best. It may not be my best, but it's their best. So I'm okay with that. Number 3 is be impeccable with your word, meaning don't lie, do as you said you were going to do. And the fourth agreement is do not assume, because in the English language, you may have seen this before, the word assume you can easily dissect into 3 units. It's ass, you, me. So as you assume, you make an ass, not a donkey, but an ass out of you and me. So assuming is one of those big traps that we easily fall into because we judge that which is not to our norm. We judge it by our standards and thereby negating somebody else's experience and maybe drawing completely erroneous conclusions, right? So,
Could I say for our viewers who are watching this in English as a second language, to make an ass of somebody means to make a fool of somebody.
Right. And the word ass does not only refer to your derriere, to the rear end, the buttocks that you sit on. In English, ass also can be a synonym for donkey, right?
Yes.
Is there another synonym that I should be aware of? And may not
Well,
be.
by implication of this, it's also a fool.
All right.
What an ass. Yeah.
Right. Now,
we're getting colloquial here, but
back to the original question. So how do we, what are the best ways in your experience? I mean, you've dealt with immigrants, with refugees much more frequently than I have. How have you heard from them in these last couple of days? How are they doing? How are they keeping connected? How are they making sure they feel that they belong in a time where physical closeness, proximity is very much restricted?
Yeah, I think that this is a challenge for everybody because, if we're restricted to just being with our families, our families are probably our race, our nationality, and there's probably a language being spoken in the home that's not English. And how do you become part of the community? How do you fit in? How do you belong? It's with interacting with those other folks who don't look like you, but you're committed to being part of their lives. And so I think this is an extra challenge for those folks right now. I want to say on the flip side, I think all of us at times could just really use, hitting the pause button and say, okay, we got so much external stuff going on in our lives. Let's just cut it out for a minute. Sit back, take a deep breath. Okay, who am I? Who are you? Oh, this is my family. My goodness, because we run off in different directions to school and work and volunteering, and we sometimes overlook those precious people living with us. So I don't think it's it's horrible. I think there are a lot of really positive things coming out of this, and people are taking care of home projects that they've been overlooking. I saw a guy out trimming his hedges in the front of his yard the other day. Well, if you're stuck at home, you got good stuff to do there too. So I mean,
like you told me earlier, you took out the chainsaw to cut down half of Michigan's lumber timber.
Yeah. Well, there's some wild apple trees overhanging my pole barn, and it's not good for the roof. And so, yeah, I spent an hour or two cutting up. So those projects are good. But going back to how do you fit in? How do you get a sense of belonging in the community? This is, I think, a really challenging time for doing that, because you can't go out. You can't go and do the one volunteer thing that gets you, speaking in English and not your first language, and watching Americans interact and learning how they do that. And just also, rolling up your sleeves and actually doing something as part of your new adopted community. So
right.
Huge challenge.
Right. Now, what I'm gleaning from this and from my brief online live experiences that I've been doing over the past couple of days, I'm leaning towards creating like an open Zoom meeting like this, and extending basically an open invitation for my quote unquote tribe to join in, and I'd be happy to live stream that as well. And creating community, maybe some people have called it virtual happy hours. Sure, that could be one way to frame it. Doesn't have to do with drinking. And if I'm opening it up to my tribe, there'll be people in different time zones, right? It'll be all over the globe, and it doesn't have to be with drinking. But I want to create an environment where people feel like, okay, let's chat for an hour. Let's chat maybe about one singular topic, or maybe let's everybody join in and say, what did I experience in the last 48, 72 hours? What worked, what didn't work? What's going on in my part of the world? How are people in my part of town or in my community dealing with the stresses that are thrown at us? So that could create a sense of community and sense of belonging. So as I'm saying this out loud, this is completely unrehearsed, and this is completely unscripted. This is a stream of consciousness right now. If you're watching this and you want to do this, and you feel like you want to belong to that environment, please take this as an invitation. And you may have seen me glance down a little bit. I'm not glancing away from you or the camera. I'm looking at my phone, because that allows me to view the comments that are coming in here. So if you feel like you belong to our tribe, and if you're here and you're watching this live, feel free to drop a comment here, ask a question, weigh in on this topic. What has been your experience in the last couple of weeks? Sumaya Khalifa, my Egyptian American friend here in Atlanta, has commented on the Culture Guy page that she wants to learn about Alan's show. So yes, Sumaya, we'll make sure that you get the link, and we'll make sure everybody else gets the link. Yes, please feel free to weigh in here. You don't have to. If you don't feel like it, if you just want to be passive, that's fine by us. Ellen and I will keep this going. Now, Ellen, I'm curious, because the social aspect.
I don't know if you're
Yes,
going to go
please.
on to another topic, but I mean, I as you were talking, it gave me a chance to think, and I think because we live in society, the word social means in society, as a community. And if those physical ties are cut, then how do we recreate community, with, this really dynamic and really unlimited potential medium of technology and cameras and computers and such.
Right.
And so I'm really heartened by the creativity that's popping up left and right, with musicians from multiple locations are all sort of streaming in. I don't know how they do it. There's smarter people than I. And they're creating music and symphonies together. Obviously, somebody's mastering all this, but these are musicians who are self-quarantined, but through technology are joining together and recreating community. And I think, it's not the same joy, I think, as being 3D present with others, but it's the next best thing. And I mean,
Exactly.
much more joyful anyway than music, so that's
Right.
one example. And
Yep.
people are using the streaming for other comparable purposes. So the creativity is just going on. So I
Right.
think that, so you can't go out and make community. How do you recreate community here and find if people can share? I know that a topic for a lot of my student clients this last week when we first Skype in for their coaching sessions is, how are you coping? What's your family doing? And I think there's that sense of community. So it's a new, we're all under these harsh new conditions. How are we going to respond? Do you have tips? Oh, you did this. Oh, what a great idea. And so we can teach each other and then maybe reinforce community and the sense of belonging.
I noticed this week. I was planning out a calendar for the webinars that I plan to host in the next few weeks, and I'm planning to do a webinar on doing business with Sweden and with people from Sweden. And I have a partner in crime here in Atlanta who is Swedish, and I jumped this on him. He didn't know that this was coming up. I said, hey, are you ready next week? I want to do the webinar. We talked about this months ago. Now's the time. Let's go do this. And he texts me and says, and I'm not going to mention his name for privacy reasons because he asked me to. He was diagnosed. He was tested. He's got COVID-19, and he says, I can't. My voice is sore. I'm going through this. I probably caught it from my kids who don't care at all, but it's hidden me. And if you want me to be your partner in crime for this, give me 2 weeks, and I hope it's better. But if you want to do it immediately or within the next couple of days, then find somebody else to do it. And thanks for the opportunity. So it reminded me that the hits are getting closer, and if we don't keep the physical distance, if we don't wash hands and do as they tell us, then we might be part of the problem and not the solution. And it also reminded me to be emotionally intelligent, to check in with people, to see how they are doing, just because some of us might feel this is an abstract threat, that it may not be as abstract as we may think, just because it hasn't hit us yet. And you mentioned, Alan, the whole digital setup, lights, camera, action, computer, internet. Of course, this whole belonging and recreating social behavior via technology is also affecting those who don't have access to these tools. So there is obviously a socioeconomic digital divide that is putting the marginalized parts of our populations yet again at a disadvantage, right? But before I go down that rabbit hole, I want to address and acknowledge the folks that are waving here and poking and making comments. So Brett Perry joined us. Hey, Brett, he did a live with me a couple of days ago. Susanna Evans from St.
Brett,
Louis, Missouri.
nice to see you last week or a week ago when you did this, and so now
Yeah.
I can.
Susanna Evans, and I'm pronouncing her name German because she is in St. Louis, Missouri, is weighing in here. Lindy Chapman from, well, I never know where Lindy is. I think she might be from New England, but then she lived in Texas, and then she was in Italy for quite a while. So I don't know where she's at right now.
We are a peripatetic group.
Yeah, and Courtney Thaler. I'm hoping, Courtney, that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So forgive me if I'm being insensitive to that, but I believe it's
From
Thaler.
Grand Rapids.
Oh, so you know her. Good. Excellent.
Hey, Courtney.
So Courtney is asking, how do we manage the current xenophobia with COVID and ensuring we are all supporting one another? That is an excellent question, Courtney. How do we manage the current xenophobia? What's your take on this, Alan?
I think that anytime there's a crisis, people look for a scapegoat. And, Christian, you could go on, we could have a whole hour's conversation on scapegoating in the 1930s and 40s in Europe. But, we've got, a crisis now, and, before it was those other people. And so, because, it's not us or it's not our circumstances, so we have to do some finger pointing. It's sadly human nature. So how can we extend extend grace, extend welcome, extend acceptance. It's extra hard right now because we can't do that in a physical way. But what I've really learned is that if you don't speak up in some way, your silence is complicity. And so you have to, if you hear something that you know is profoundly, xenophobic, it's racist, it's picking on some marginalized group, you have to use whatever, white power or native speaker power or male power or
Right.
ability, whatever, you have to leverage that and say, no, this isn't fair. You're picking on these people. They did not do this, whether
Well, it's
don't
the
pick on
words that we choose,
Chinese.
right? If we allow ourselves to continue some of the vitriol that has been perpetuated by some people in the public sphere, calling it the Chinese flu or the virus that came from China, and blanketly labeling a whole country for an outbreak that may very well have happened elsewhere. I mean, countering that would be a start, right? And it
Absolutely.
obviously it starts with some of our leaders who fail to use the proper language for this, but it can stop with us no matter where it starts. We can, as you said, we can put a stop to xenophobic language or to exclusive behaviors.
Yeah. Yes, this will not happen in my space. You may do
Yeah.
this, in your cubicle, or you may do this elsewhere, but
Right.
around
Right.
me, this is not acceptable.
Here's another question from Paolo Sayani.
Oh, Paulo, oi, tudo bem?
Who from a Portuguese speaker, I'm assuming.
He's from Brazil, and from my favorite location in Brazil, from the lovely state of Bahia, Salvador.
From Salvador. Well, bom dia or boa tarde at this point of day, I guess. Paulo has a question for Alan. Would it be true to say that we need to be even more intentional in our communication channels during these times of physical separation? Which ways can we actually do that? Being more intentional in our communication. Good point.
I think there's always the trap for us as human beings to only look at our own situation, our own environment, our own history, our own needs, our own upbringing, and within those narrow limits. And so I think we have to constantly ask ourselves, how is this affecting other people? And I think, my wife and I sit on the couch every evening, watch the news, watch reports from everywhere. And every night it's the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that this would affect this segment of society, these kinds of workers, or these people in this socioeconomic class, or this, this special group. And, what are we doing about the homeless, right? And can you imagine a more profoundly awful thing than being without a safe place to live, and with food insecurity, and your lungs are being racked with COVID-19?
Yeah.
And so I think just the mindfulness and the awareness. And so part of that, and I love Paulo's question, but it's about the intentionality, is how do you start to think like other people and not just like yourself? How is this affecting other people? And so when I'm communicating,
a
how do you
mindfulness,
ask
so to
about
say.
how is this, what's happening in your world? And sometimes
Right.
maybe it's just those open-ended questions, what's going on with you? And maybe even, are you short of something, or how are the kids doing? Or, are you short of toilet paper or whatever? How might I help you? Just being as mindful as you can.
Mindfulness is part of that, right? Being, and I like what you said, and I don't want this to slip. I want to put an exclamation mark behind what you said, Alan. Asking open-ended questions in our Western context and Western societies, we sometimes are primed and imprinted to asking questions that prompt a yes or no answer, which aren't always helpful in communication. And to Paolo's question, they are the opposite of intentional, because they leave a very narrow path for the conversation that could ensue. If we ask open-ended questions, like how are you doing, and what's going on in your world, and just questions that do not prompt a yes or no answer, that will be a much more rich conversation, in a conversation that allows um, the feeling of belonging to blossom, right? Um, my family, we moved to the city of Atlanta about 3 years ago. Yeah, April will be 3 years.
Mm.
And we moved to a part of the city that is, or has been, often referred to as ghetto, or as a black neighborhood where white people wouldn't feel welcome. It has also been described as a neighborhood that is about to be gentrified, which the arrival of white people with privilege could be seen as such, right? So I'm part of the problem. However, I think we've established within those 3 years that we lived here that we do belong, and that we do not take over, and that we do not push anyone out who's been here longer. Um, and case in point, the family, the lady that lives across the street from me, I'm looking. If I look over my computer screen, I look at her house right now. She, up until a week ago, she was working as a custodian at the Atlanta airport, and custodian means she was cleaning bathrooms. And she's not doing that right now because there's nothing happening at the Atlanta airport, and she was sent home. And I don't know how she pays the bills. We are in exchange. We talk across the street. We say more than hello. We have a relationship with our neighbors. Um, but it's that type of interaction that we may have to do more of, and that sometimes that means talking to the quote unquote the other in a mindful manner. Um, and my wife did. I don't want to. I mean, of course, I want to praise my wife, but I don't want this to come off as some hey, look at us, well, how good we did. There was a gentleman roaming down the street 2 or 3 days ago, and he looked kind of this. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right. Disheveled, not
Disheveled.
not in disheveled. So not in good shape, both physically and in his whole outward appearance. And he asked my wife for money. And honestly, we didn't have cash on hand at that point. And she said, "But I can. What do you need the money for? Are you hungry? Do you need food?" And he said, "Yeah, the food would be nice." So she packed him a little to go back, right, with some food. And it's not like you stop at a traffic light where somebody's holding up a sign and said, I'm in desperate need and give me your change. It This is a more automated, yeah, I give you money, I give you a piece of currency, and I alleviate my bad conscience, and I keep on driving while you're still there waiting for somebody else to give you money. So this was a very immediate interaction, and the look of gratitude in that gentleman's face was priceless. So sometimes this means belonging. We'll have to, or we may choose to extend our zone of appropriate behaviors into a way that we haven't done in the past. At least that's what it means for me.
Yeah.
Because
Christian, before we move on, can you ask Paulo if we answered his question, or maybe I
he
missed it?
yes he did, yes he did.
Okay. All right.
And also we have a couple more questions. Lindy confirms that she moved back to Boston. All right, thanks for that, Lindy. Lillian Tsai joined us. Hello, Lillian. Lillian says, I agree around the xenophobia question. She agrees that a person who to ask a person who's making xenophobic statements, what was your intention with what you just said? So confronting the xenophobe with a question like that. Yes, that's one way. I agree.
So let me just piggyback onto that, Christian, if I may. For the last 10 or so years, I've been facilitating the Institutes for Healing Racism. And part of the training is beyond, after we look at historical causes for racism and racial inequity in the United States, is finally what tools can we impart to people so that they can begin to take their better understanding and some skills back to their community, their family, their school, their organizations. And there's a marvelous, marvelous free downloadable PDF from those wonderful people at the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center. And their teaching arm is called, oh golly, Teaching Tolerance. And they provide, newsletters for teachers that have, how to bring in, anti-racist practices and awareness into their classrooms. But they've got this 90-page downloadable PDF on 6 steps for speaking up when you encounter
nice.
bigoted language in the workplace, in the family. They give all these different scenarios and lots of practice, and then suggestions for how to deal with those. So highly recommended. It's free, and which is the best price.
If you find the link, would you be so nice to, after the fact, post it in the chat box so
My
people
pleasure.
can
Yep.
find it? Excellent. So Paulo confirms that you did answer the question. Obrigado. That's what I'm saying. Lindy Chapman says she saw a powerful post today about the impact the current situation is having on families with a domestic abuse partner.
Oh my.
Well, that is, I saw something similar just the other day, that being confined in close spaces may have that negative result. And I saw a statistic, was it yesterday? If I still find it in my inbox, I'll post it here in the chat box later on. An average, how much living space people have on average in different cultures. So it was flabbergasting to see how little individual space is available to people in certain countries, and the smaller the space that is available to you as an individual, if you're living under one roof, will be cause for conflict. You will maybe feel like you belong, but not in a group that is treating you well, right? So yes, that is unfortunately one of the potential side effects of this curfew or this lockdown. I'm looking if there's any other questions that we may have missed. I think this is the status for now. So I'd like to use the remaining 8 or so minutes we have, Alan, to focus on the work that you do and how you continue to do your work, because a lot of people keep asking us, well, how do we keep cash flow going? How do we keep our business, our activities going in a world where we can't go out to do the work? So you've been providing language tutoring, language training online for a number of years. So I don't think you have to relearn what you're doing currently, do you?
No.
No. So
no.
So in a nutshell, how do you do it?
So when the world was less digital, I mostly had clients who were in my region, and I would go to their company and reserve a conference room, and then every hour a new employee would come by for their coaching, and or another company would have me come in and do like a 2 or 3 hour workshop seminar. But that was all 3D, and with the blessed advent of this kind of technology, I have, earlier this week I had a coaching meeting in the Netherlands, and somebody in Japan, and and then in Georgia. So that just gives that kind of flexibility. So I feel really connected to people. I understand it's still 2D, right? It's still just on a flat screen. What I try to do with my individual coaching clients is, if they're within any kind of a drivable distance, I will set up the first meeting with the HR department and actually go to their place of employment and meet them, face to face, so we can spend, even an extra hour or a lunchtime, as well as, professional assessment and all of that, just so that you can see that this is not a, this dark, shady internet character. Because I think a lot of people are a little concerned about, oh, how do I create a coaching relationship, online, because the internet is potentially scary. So there is some of that just trust factor. So, whenever possible, I love to meet people. And as my wife will tell you, I'm a people person. So that's, even more delightful if we can spend 3D time together.
This happened to me last week. new coaching client with a company that I've worked with for many, many years, and they released a new individual from their organization. This gentleman would like to or we would like for you to work with this employee, and he suggested that we meet in person. This was last week, a week ago today. And I was already a little bit antsy, like, I'm not sure if this is probably the best way to do this. And okay, but if he insists on meeting in person, I'm not going to say no, because the initial meeting, as you said, is a trust building exercise, and really part of the foundational part of the work. And we agreed to meet and he said, well, and I said, well, we'll sit 6 feet or 2 meters apart, and maybe we'll have a hand sanitizer dispenser in front of us, and I'm okay with that. And he said, okay, good. And we said, let's meet at a restaurant. So I called the restaurant the day before. They said, nope, we're not doing, you can't sit. We only do takeout. So I was like, okay, that died. Then he suggested, well, let's meet at a public park. And so, okay, good. So no virtual meeting. He was still reluctant to do virtual. So I drove to that public park. Mind you, this was a 2-hour drive for me. So we go to this public park. Turns out it was closed. It was a state or federal park, and they said, nope, no more. So what we did is, it was raining cats and dogs that day too, so we couldn't just take a walk, right? So we found a strip mall, and there was of all places, a Chinese restaurant that had closed down for the day, or for the foreseeable future. And under their front awning, under that roof, they had the outdoor seating still standing there. So we sat down there at a 6 feet difference. So yeah, creating belonging, creating connection in a time of weirdness, right?
Right. Christian, so I know our time is running short. I don't know if you have one other thing, but I wanted to go back to this question of belonging, because frequently we will wrap up our TV interviews with this question: what is your understanding of belonging? And so over the years, I've heard just this wide variety of, but whatever it is that creates the sense deep in a person's soul that, yes, this is now my place. And I have just 3 examples that I had that jotted down, and I wanted to share with you. And one is actually because Paolo messaged into us. He had something really profound, and that is, so Brazilians, are very social people, and they love to barbecue. And there's a whole different concept between barbecue and grilling, okay? White North Americans grill, but
churrasco.
Other people barbecue, which is a whole more elaborate, so I won't get into that. But Brazilians are really, they know specific cuts of meat. And for them, one of the most delectable is the picanha. And there in Michigan, in this small town in Michigan, there's a corner grocery store that has a butcher counter. And in negotiating with the butcher, the butcher obviously recognizes there's good business, but these Brazilians, lots of them, millions of Brazilians, coming into the store, he learned how to prepare this certain cut so that Brazilians could have their barbecue. Okay.
Lovely.
And so the fact that this community, now it feels like a little slice of Brazil. And I think that there's this balance between, okay, we got to venture out, we got to speak with the locals, we got to, fit into the community, but sometimes you just need this, like, once a month on a Sunday, you just got to hang out with your own people just to get sort of regrounded and have that special cut of meat. The other 2 examples
and not only the cut of meat, I'm sure that Paolo will agree that you also need your pão de queijo with it, and you need maybe a little bit of bowl of feijoada to go along with it, right?
Yeah, and I can provide a reference for a Michigan bakery owned by a Brazilian who makes pão de queijo frozen. You can sell it or buy it and bake it. But the other one was really profound, was a Chinese professor here at the university. He's a member of the local Chinese community. They have Saturday school, Chinese school for the kids. And to become part of the community, they did this Adopt a Highway thing. And I don't know if you have this in Georgia. I think it's a national program.
Yep.
So your group takes these 2 miles of a roadway, and a couple times a year, your responsible for picking up the garbage. And you get a sign on the highway that says, adopt a highway, Grand Rapids Chinese Association. And he said, you know what? Every time I drive past that sign, every time I drive in that road stretch, he said, this is my road. This is our road. We are responsible. And I get goosebumps every time I tell the story. It seems so simple, but I mean, it underscores the sense of, yeah, this is, we can be here too.
Yeah. Yeah. And gladly, countries based on mass immigration have developed their own unique ways of making that possible, facilitating that in a more structured way, differently from other countries who are more, well, let's say, ethnocentric, or well, maybe that's not the word I'm looking for, whose national identity is more centered around ethnicity, language, and the common culture, which you find a lot throughout Europe and other parts of the world. Yeah, but that's a whole new tangent that we could start a new session on. We're at the hour. Of course, we could go on forever, and there is no trouble in going a few minutes long and a few minutes over. But I would like to acknowledge everyone who joined in for the hour and has to jump off now. So thanks for being part of the Culture Talk. And Alan, thank you for taking time out of your day to chat around this. And thank you everybody who was watching, everybody who commented here. I saw that, I just want to make sure you see that as well, Alan. Lillian Tsai already commented, posted a link from tolerance.org with a speaking up PDF. So there is already a resource available in the chat box.
Community.
Community works. Yes, this is how we belong to each other here. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And more comments from Brazil. Somebody is really getting hungry by our talk. I can understand. So am I. And just for those of you who might be drawn more to Argentina, yes, you do meet and asado very well as well. And I do understand that Brazilians have no idea how to do this right if you're from Argentina, and the other way around. So I'm not going into that fight. But I hope you still all feel that you belong here to this hour, and we will have more of these culture talks coming up in the future. And as I said throughout this call, at some point in the very near future, I'll figure out how we can have a larger group join in here until we're at capacity and exchange ideas.
Christian, always a delight talking with you, mein Brüderlein, and everyone else, thanks for joining us.
And what I did not do, and I promised Alan I would, so now I'm putting him on the spot. Those of you who had to jump off anyway because it was at the hour, you're missing out, Elabech, as we say in southern Germany. Alan is the master of language puns, or as my daughters would say, of corny dad jokes. And since I'm a corny dad, I'm good at that too, but I found the master in Alan. So any good good pun, any good language joke you can
take it out with one language riddle. What do you do to comfort a heartbroken grammarian? What do you say to comfort a heartbroken grammarian?
What's a grammarian?
A grammarian is someone who studies grammar.
Oh, a heartbroken grammarian. What do you do to?
What do you say to comfort a heartbroken grammarian?
I have no idea.
There. And of course, part of the joke is it's better written because the word there is spelled in 3 different ways in English, and the average non-grammarian often writes the wrong one.
There. Okay, got it. See, a new one. My daughters will hate you for it. Awesome.
Good, I hope so. I'll text it to them.
Alan, thank you very much. Thanks for everybody who was watching. This was the Culture Talk, Friday, March 27, and we are out. Bye-bye. See you guys next time.